Thank you so much, Blaine. Such an honor having you here on the show, the xMonks Tribe. How have you been today?
I've been very good. Thank you, Gaurav. It's been it's been a very good year so far. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm,
We're
hmm,
only 4 months into it, but I like how it's beginning.
Tell me more about that.
Well, we've got a number of projects that we're working with. All of them are moving in the direction that I'd like them to be moving, so that's a good thing. Yeah, some writing projects, some social media outreach. We've got a new program that we're launching. We've got a new, hopefully, TV series that Apple TV is looking at picking up. So there's, just a number of different things that we're working with.
Yeah.
And, I continue to do some work with, Jimmy Mystery's group, and the Della Leaders group.
Hmm,
Um, and so, this whole notion of compassionate capitalism, which your listeners and viewers can see over my shoulder here,
hmm.
um, we're looking at ways to really have that become more and more part of the mainstream conversation in business. How do you run a compassionately capitalistic company so
Mm, mm,
that
mm.
we minimize the harm of business and
Yeah,
maximize the good?
absolutely. So thank you so much. As you mentioned, I was just going through your book called Compassionate Capitalism. And in fact, I think universe has been extremely kind because in the last 1.5 years, I've had the honor of working with Mr. Ross Sisodia, where he uses the concept of conscious capitalism. And of
Yes.
course, our paths have crossed, and I've had the great honor of interacting with you on several occasions. Blaine, thank you for your time and all your kindness. And while going through this book, Compassionate Capitalism, it gave me a very different perspective of looking at leadership. Would love to hear from you. How would you define a leader, and what is the responsibility of leadership in today's world?
It's a great question. Actually, two good questions. Uh, Yeah, I've spent probably close to 40 years working, with leaders around the world. I've personally have trained and coached, close to 300,000 business leaders
Wow,
in this time frame.
300,000.
300,000. And in that process, I've wrestled with how do we define, number one, what a leader is, and number two, the act of leadership, because they are separate.
Yeah.
And I've come to, kind of a position where, first of all, I needed to simplify things so that it was accessible to as many people as possible. So when I started looking at what is a leader, what does a leader actually do? At the end of the day, when you strip away everything around personality, around style, around, what people generally think of when they think of a leader, whether it's Mohandas Gandhi or whether it's Steve Jobs, Mother Teresa. I mean, they're all different people. But when they're done, what they've done is they've created movement. They've created movement. They created change. By definition, they created change. Movement always causes change. So a leader is anybody that causes movement in a system that they're a part of. Now, what I like about that definition is that because it's impossible for you, for me, for anybody to come into a system, whether it's a family, whether it's a business, whether I'm a consumer, whether I'm the boss, I will, the system has to shift. It has to move to allow for my presence, to accommodate my presence. So just by showing up, I cause movement. Now, what's interesting about that is when you think about it in that way, everybody actually is a leader because everybody is always causing movement.
Hmm,
So the question that gets moved to very quickly is that movement effective?
hmm, hmm.
That's where the value is. That question is where the value is.
Yeah.
Effective leaders cause the kind of movement that they need to have in the system in order to get the result that they say they want.
Hmm,
Most people are highly ineffective because they don't pay attention to the quality of the movement that they're creating.
Mm,
We're always creating movement.
mm.
So that leads us to, how do we define leadership?
Yeah. Yeah.
Leadership is the activity that leaders engage in. So leadership, in the way I define it, is the process of co-creating coordinated movement.
Mm, mm.
It's pretty simple. Co-creation, coordinated movement.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting about that particular definition, both of them, are directed towards movement.
Mm.
Co-created movement, co-created, coordinated movement. I
Mm.
can get coordinated movement, if I've got a big enough stick, big enough pot of money, I
Yeah.
can get people to coordinate for a short period of time.
Mm.
That's how most traditional leaders think, is external motivators, either reward or fear, coordinated movement for a short period of time. The problem
Mm.
with that is, what you have is compliance. You
Mm.
do not have commitment.
Yeah.
When you add co-creation
Mm.
is ownership transfer. My idea now
Mm.
becomes your idea. And that's a valuable idea for both of us. So with
Mm.
co-creation in place,
Mm.
I have commitment as a possibility when I go to coordinated movement.
Mm.
So it becomes a much easier process. I've got to do a lot of work on the front
Mm.
to have an easier process on the backside. So co-creating coordinated movement is what
Mm.
highly effective leaders do. Now,
Beautiful.
long answer, but I appreciate the question.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Blaine. And I'm just reflecting. I'm just looking at that. A movement could be a noun and a verb as well, right?
Mhm.
And I think in the definition, we are referring to both, because a leader is somebody who can actually create a movement and can cause movement to lead to that movement.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And part of it has to do with, you use the word noun. A leader, is both a verb and a noun.
Yeah.
A leader is both a verb and a noun.
Mm.
Yeah. And Buckminster Fuller, years ago, wrote a very tiny little book that didn't get much notoriety at all, but it was called I Am a Verb.
Mm.
I Am a Verb. And it was a brilliant little book.
Mm.
And I'll use it in my coaching work with executives. And one of the questions I'll ask is, if you were a verb, what is your verb?
Mm.
What's the verb that describes the movement that you are?
Mm.
And
Mm.
Steve Jobs, I innovate, therefore I am. Rene Descartes, I think, therefore I am. Walt
Mm.
Disney, I imagine, therefore I am. So
Mm.
that verb helps define the noun that I actually am.
What
I
a what a
teach, therefore I am.
what a profound question. If you were to define yourself in a verb, what would that be? Wow.
Yeah.
In your book, you have very beautifully created a linkage between leadership and compassionate capitalism. So please help me understand, what's the connection between leadership and
Mhm.
compassionate capitalism?
Beautiful question. Well, we'll just kind of go back to the definition of leadership: co-creating coordinated movement. Implicit in that definition is the experience of connection, not separation.
Mm.
My followers and I actually joined together. We are co-creating. We are co-creating. Now, when you think about this in terms of compassion,
Mm.
it is impossible for me to feel and to behave, more importantly, to behave compassionately with something I don't feel connected to.
Mm.
So the idea of business being conducted from a position of compassion requires that the business itself, the leaders in the business, recognize that everything is connected. I'm connected not just to my people. I'm not connected just to my customers. I'm connected to anything and everything that business touches. And then I look at, how do I behave in a manner that does no harm?
Wow.
Because a lot of businesses, they do harm, when they go to market. And it's because the leaders aren't thinking that they're connected.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that a profound thought that only if I can look at that, how everything that I'm creating, everything that I'm coordinating is touching everything around me? And that's where I think an essence of oneness comes. In this world, Blaine, the people that I interact with, most of us, including myself, we are so busy taking care of our stature. We are so protective of our status quo. We are so protective of the accomplishment that we have. Now, how can we develop the essence of oneness, non-duality, uh, co-creation, coordination? How can we bring in that essence into the world that we are living in, which is so protective, which is so fearful, which is all about I need to take care of my own self? And
Yeah. What you're describing is the dominant mindset in the world today, which is one of scarcity.
mm,
It's a notion of scarcity. The experience of separation is a consequence of believing that there are limited opportunities, that there
mm,
are limited resources, that
mm,
there are limited fill in the blank. So what ends up happening is that the mindset that most people occupy is exactly as you described. I'm separate from, and so I need to compete in order to accumulate what I
hoarding,
should have.
yeah, a need to hoard things.
To hold things, to accumulate and to hold on to things, whether it's status, whether it's money, whether it's property, but most people, most businesses are organized around, and this is where we need to make a profit, bigger the
Absolutely.
better.
Yeah.
And that notion of accumulation is antithetical to the way that nature actually works. Nature does not, nature's the only truly free market economy.
Hmm.
There are no artificial constraints in nature, and everything in nature, in some way or other, serves as a center of distribution,
Hmm.
not accumulation.
Hmm.
So, in answer to the question here, how do I begin to think differently and as a consequence act differently? I begin to think about myself as a center of distribution.
Hmm.
Think of my company as a center of distribution, not as a center of accumulation.
Hmm.
So, just practical example. Most of my IP, most of most of the things that we develop here in my organization, they're freely distributed. People can access just about everything
Hmm.
that we've got. Now, do we sell some things? Absolutely, we sell some things. I need to, the idea of, the business needs to be a viable entity. So I'm not saying don't make a profit. Yeah, everybody needs to make a profit in some way, whether I'm a school child, but the profit is my learning. Yeah,
Hmm.
I need to learn something, but then I need to be able to give it away, to distribute that learning. If I
Hmm.
just hold it close, it does nobody any good.
Yeah.
So that mindset of distribution fosters the experience of connection.
Hmm.
It helps reinforce that experience of connection.
I just love it when you say it fosters the connection in the world. And on the first go, I heard it faster. And I realized the faster I distribute it, what I have, the faster I'll be able to build more connection as well. And I'll
Mhm.
be able to foster the connections as well with
Yeah.
others. Blaine, at the same time, the world that we live in, there's a tendency to compare myself with others as well. And always unconsciously, most of us, if not all, most of us, we are playing a one-up game.
Mhm. Yep.
How do these two concepts fit in? Because there's so much of FOMO, fear of missing out. And
Yep.
then from that space, I'm operating from a space of scarcity mentality where I need to play a one-up game. But on the other hand, the concept that you're talking about, that how can I be a conduit? How can I be a source to distribute everything that I have and be totally in alignment to nature, totally in alignment to the universe? How do these two
Yeah.
concepts stay together?
Gaurav, you ask great questions. You do. Thank you. Uh, the subtitle to the book Compassionate Capitalism is A Journey to the Soul of Business. Okay. And it's the soul that I'm interested in. And I don't mean soul in a religious sense. I really mean it as a very pragmatic description of the source of livingness that comes through and animates everything in this universe. A rock has a soul, okay? And a soul is nothing more than information looking to be expressed. That's what the soul is. The soul is information looking to be expressed. So the idea of competition suggests that my soul is limited. Yeah. I have to, and comparison's a good place to begin. It's a horrible place to live. Comparison will kind of trigger desire. It's kind of, ooh, I'd like to have that. Okay. But I don't have to have it at the expense of taking it from you. That's what competition is about. Instead, when I'm looking at living from the soul of my business, from the soul of who I am, I start to get creative. There's a huge distinction to be made between the competitive mindset and the creative mindset. Steve Jobs, while people will think that he was an amazing competitor, he actually wasn't. He was an amazing creator. Yeah, and I mean creator in the sense of ideation. Yeah, he would take things and go, what can be created with this from an experience standpoint? What wants to be birthed here? And he would, he famously did not run focus groups in the organization. He didn't care what people thought. There was no competition involved in that. Why would I care what my competitors are doing? What I want to create, because what I want to create is going to benefit. And part of it has to do with understanding what the purpose of business is. The purpose of business is not to make money. That's not the purpose of business. Now, you need to make money to stay in business, but the purpose of business is to enhance the probability and the possibility of thriving on this planet. If my service or product uplifts your experience of living, you're going to want to buy my product. You're going to want to. And I don't care if you're a noodle shop in the corner of a small little place here. If you're serving something that uplifts the experience of the people that come to you, you're going to have people continuing to come to you. Yeah, one of the oldest companies on this planet, it's about 780 years old, I think, is a noodle shop in Japan. They've been in the same family for over 700 years. And what they do is one thing, and they do it very well. We uplift the experience of the customers who come into our shop. We uplift their experience of being alive for a short window while they're having noodles.
For the time being, I'm saying let's assume what you're saying is the universal truth. Let's assume. And my heart says that is the universal truth. But at the same time, what I'm saying is let's assume it's the universal truth. What do you think? Who are those people who are trying to bend the reality? And why are they doing that? Because what you are saying is a very different narrative. And the narrative which is running in the world is very, very different.
Bended in which direction?
Not so effective direction, I don't think, which is very beneficial for the humanity. Because what you are saying is that the nature says continue to distribute what you have, so that the more you distribute, the more it's going to foster connections, right? And on the other hand, there's another narrative which is going on in the world that says hold on to the things, right? Hoard more money, and capitalism, and one-up psychology, and I should be better than you, operate from a space of competitiveness. There are so many media ads people are talking about, let's make more money, let's make more money, let's make more money, right? Now, every time when I go to a LinkedIn or a social media platform, I experience a lot of fear there, right? So who are those people? Why are they doing that?
Those people are the vast majority of the people on this planet. And they are captured, they're literally hypnotized by an existing mindset, by an existing narrative that says, we talked about this earlier, I have to get mine because there's not enough to go around. And it's that experience, the experience of separation. The experience of separation. I am separate from nature. I'm separate from life. I'm separate from other people. Lends itself, it can't not lend itself to a competitive mindset, an inappropriately competitive mindset. There's nothing wrong with competition. Olympic athletes, I mean, the question is, who am I competing with? And for the sake of what am I competing? If I'm competing with another to raise myself, I'm really competing with myself, because I'm looking for external, I use an external standard as a metric by which I can uplift who I am. Okay. So the competition is actually internal for me. And I'm not taking any way away from, the runner in the lane next to me if I'm running a race. Where this comes from, in my experience, and just the research I've done, is it's human nature in part. There's a piece to human nature that says it's rational for me to get as much as I can. Rational self-interest is the dominant dynamic in play in business and for most people in life. Rational self-interest. I need to get mine. What's in it for me? That's contrasted to something that's called enlightened self-interest, which is required for both of us to win. Enlightened self-interest is, I need to benefit, obviously, but I'm in relationship with you. I'm connected with you. So enlightened self-interest suggests that I need to also take care of you in the sense that I don't do any harm to you. If I'm not doing harm to you, I'm actually I'm actually positioning you to win. So the whole notion of win-win has a very pragmatic foundation to it, and it's based on enlightened self-interest, which is what Adam Smith wrote about when he wrote the book, The Wealth of Nations, back in 1776. That was the first written down, the first codified example of an economic model. And it's also the blueprint for what started out as capitalism. Capitalism it doesn't look like that at all anymore today. The distinction between rational self-interest, which is self-serving, which is selfish, and enlightened self-interest, which is altruistic, which is looking from a perspective of first do no harm in our business transaction. Because I'm connected to you.
What I'm assuming is, if we continue to walk on the path of rational self-interest over enlightened interest of others as well, the default future that we are creating for ourselves is not very bright.
It's not sustainable at all.
It's not sustainable at all. And I think that's where leaders like you, Blaine, leaders like Ross Sisodia, leaders like, there's so many people who are talking about conscious capitalism, purposeful organizations. People are talking about how can we actually bring in and do more value addition? How can we be a source of good to the overall humanity? Where should we begin that could allow an individual to experience that overall growth is the only way which is sustainable and can take care of future?
The place to begin is to understand that if you think globally, you need to act locally. Now I know that's almost what's the word I'd use here? It's been said so. Think globally, act locally it's been said so often it becomes meaningless. But I actually do believe that this is how it works. I need to be able to act locally with myself. I see myself as a center of distribution. My intent in any interaction that I have with anybody is to leave them feeling better about themselves at the end of the conversation than they did at the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah, as you said, providing a better experience to the other person in everything that I'm doing. Yeah.
If I'm doing that for myself, doing that as myself, it has ripple effect out into the universe. this is philosophical, but one of the things that I actually entertain a lot, play with a lot in my mind, is that there is nobody out there but me. What I call reality is just an outpicturing of my internal consciousness.
Absolutely,
So
yes.
anything that is actually perturbing me, I need to look back here first. Okay, what am I out projecting? What's the inner conversation I'm having that is manifesting itself externally?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. And if I work here, I'm a center of distribution. I want to feel good about me. So that other part of me that I'm speaking to right now, yeah,
Mm,
if I want to feel good about me, I make sure that you feel good about you. Because
mm,
yeah, the aspect of you is nothing more than an outpicturing of a part of me. And I say me, not egoic, not the Blaine Bartlett,
yeah,
but the spirit that moves to and through me.
yeah, yeah. For me, this is a moment to really absorb what you're talking about, because in the morning I was talking to somebody and we were talking about self-acceptance. That unless I can accept myself, I'll not be able to accept humanity. And that's where I said acceptance is the first step to embrace humanity.
Mhm, mhm.
And here, when I'm
It is.
listening to you, that how am I a cause to the world that I'm living in? How am I manifesting the situation that I'm into? And for the last 2 weeks, Blaine, I've been dealing with a few things in my life because my external world is not going the way I would have expected,
Mhm.
both in my personal as well as professional life. So the easiest way is to blame the world. The world is like that. People don't care.
Yeah.
You do whatever good that you would like to do to people, and then they are going to ditch you. They are going to cheat you, right? But at the same time, when I took a pause and started to look at, hey, how am I creating this world for myself? If four people have left us in the last 2 weeks' time, what is it that we are doing or not doing?
Mhm. Mhm. It's a great question. Yeah. When people leave an organization, they're actually leaving the leadership of the organization.
Hmm,
That would be one way to think about it. Now, people leave for all kinds of different reasons. Sometimes it's a
hmm,
better offer someplace else. Sometimes their life situation changes.
hmm,
But yeah, the only thing that I have control over, truly, the only thing that I can control are my thoughts, my feelings, and my attitude. Everything else is outside of my control.
hmm,
So when I go back to leadership, the definition, co-creating coordinated movement, I look to myself first, co-creating. What am I actually co-creating with spirit? Am I co-creating with soul? Or am I co-creating with my ego? I get qualitatively different results depending on
hmm,
who I personally am, Blaine Bartlett, am personally co-creating with. And that
hmm,
gets manifested externally when I start to co-create with others. Outside of you know, my body. And then
hmm,
the coordinated movement. Who am I coordinating with? You know, the leadership model that I've developed, I call ACT, awareness, uh, context, communication, commitment, and trust. There's 5 pieces to it:
hmm.
awareness, context, communication, commitment, and trust. The first
Wow.
piece is awareness. And the
Hmm,
way that I define awareness is it's a realization and a noticing of where my access to the spirit that moves to and through me is either blocked or open.
hmm,
That's what I mean by awareness.
hmm,
Where is the access that I have to the soul, the spirit that brings life to what I do,
hmm,
either blocked or open?
hmm,
And when I start to notice that, I start to notice some very interesting things. I start to notice my inner conversation,
hmm,
and I start to pay attention to, conversations like, well, I'm not good enough, or, I can't trust people. Those sorts of internal dialogues, they end
hmm,
up getting manifest because I'm coordinating with those. People
hmm,
coordinate. We are continuously coordinating with our belief systems. We are continuously co-creating. Better way of saying
hmm.
this: co-creating with existing belief structures.
The way you are
And
coordinating with your thoughts, the way you are coordinating with yourself in the same way, in the similar way, you are co-creating a future for yourself as well. Wow.
absolutely,
Okay.
Yep.
So, you know, you also spoke about soul, and here we are talking about awareness. Another question which is coming to me around, and I will definitely would love to come back to the ACCCT model that you spoke about, where you spoke about awareness, context, communication, commitment, and trust. Another word which is coming to me, and I don't know where would I fit in, is ego.
Mhm.
What's the relationship between awareness, soul, and ego? Where would you place all these three?
Ego is the embodied, uh, differentiated expression of soul. Now, that's a
Hmm.
fancy way of saying you occupy a body that is different from my body. Now, that's at the physical level. You also
That's
have a
already
different way of,
separation.
yeah, solid separate. There's that separate the soul that animates you also
Hmm.
animates me. It's the same. Yeah, spirit, consciousness is another word for this. Consciousness, spirit, soul cannot be differentiated. Its expression is differentiated.
Hmm.
That is what we call ego. And
Got it.
ego shows up in an embodied form. And everybody has an ego. I mean,
Hmm.
this is kind of, we live in a physically manifested world, and our
Hmm.
ego allows us to navigate that.
Hmm.
For almost 99.9% of the people on this planet, the ego
Hmm.
is in charge.
Hmm.
Yeah. The ego is, which is that experience of separation again.
Hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with an ego. It lends itself to rational self-interest.
Hmm.
But when I start to wake up, when I start
Hmm.
to wake up and I start paying attention to the question, who am I? The only thing that I can really say, I mean, I'm not my body, but I can see if I can observe it, I can't, if anything I can observe, I am not.
Hmm.
Okay.
Anything that I can observe, I'm not.
I am not, because there's an
Got it.
observer
I
that's
I
involved
have
here.
that. I have that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I am not my body. I am not my thinking, because I can observe my thinking. I have feelings. I can observe my feelings. I have sensations, hot, cold, warm. I can observe my sensations. I'm not my sensations. So who am I? Yeah, this is Siddhartha sitting under the Bodhi tree. Yeah, patting the earth, going, I am. That's all I can recognize as true is I am.
Hmm.
Now that lends itself to what is the I am? Yeah, it doesn't have a name. In the the Sanskrit, I mean, if you look at uh, any of the great religions' writings, whether it's Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, you just kind of pick pick your poison, so to speak.
Hmm.
They all speak in some way about the unpronounceable, the unnameable God,
Hmm.
spirit. It doesn't have, it's not a name that you can actually put on your lips. Now,
Hmm.
here's the interesting thing about name. I am. The literal translation of name is nature.
Hmm.
We give somebody a name to describe their nature,
Hmm.
the nature of them. A tree, it has a nature. A rock, it has a nature.
Hmm.
Obsidian, when we start getting very discriminating with it. I am Blaine Bartlett. Well, that has a name, and it has a certain nature, a quality
Hmm.
to it. That's the ego that comes into play. But you
Hmm.
strip that away, you're left with this I am that can take any expressive form.
Hmm.
That's the I am that runs to and through me.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and a very, very simple, I mean, I am God. I mean, if
Hmm.
you look at it that way, what we're talking about here is consciousness.
Hmm.
Consciousness being manifested, externalized in physical form.
In different ways and forms. You know, Blaine, you said something so beautiful, and I would want you, if you can just double click on that. You said that I am nature. One of the questions that I've been dealing with is, if I am nature, how can I identify it? What's my absolute nature? How can I identify that?
Yeah.
And
The, yeah.
and and how would I know that's who I am? Because
Yep.
I was very conscious when I use the word, how would I identify? It has an element of identity. So that's the reason I restricted
Mhm.
myself. How would I
Mhm.
know?
Yeah. Well, I think you start to ask questions that people will spend lifetimes answering. Uh, I mean, truly, the idea of my true nature, if I look at it through the lens that I was just describing, the soul, having, yeah, not being able to, be divided. The soul is indivisible. The spirit, consciousness is indivisible. It just shows
Hmm,
up in different forms. Uh, and so part of how do I discover my true nature? I start looking past the ego. I start looking past the form that I see in front of me to see the spirit that is beneath it. One of my favorite writers is a fellow by the name of Thomas Troward. And Troward lived back in the 1800s. He was a
hmm,
Scottish philosopher, Scottish jurist. He wrote he gave a series of lectures at Edinburgh College. And one of the lectures he gave was on the nature of beauty.
hmm,
And the way he described beauty was it was that which you recognize something as being beautiful when you see the underlying spirit that gives it form.
hmm,
So you think of a sunset. A sunset is beautiful, not because of the colors necessarily, but because you see the spirit, the aliveness. The universe is alive.
hmm,
Yeah. So you see that life coming through in
hmm,
that incredible display of color. A painting,
hmm,
music. When you think of you know, yes, Ravi Shankar used to play some of the most incredible sitar. I mean,
hmm.
just I would just fall in love with it. You
Yeah,
could, and it wasn't mechanical. There was beauty. It was
yeah,
alive.
yeah.
That's where you start moving into the true essence of
Hmm.
something. When, yeah, and beauty is the name of life.
I'm not surprised that we are connecting again and again and again, Blaine, because I feel somewhere we are vibrating. At least I would choose to believe that we are vibrating at the same energy, because just few days back I was talking to another friend of mine, and we were talking about musicians, we were talking about artists, we were talking about people who are in some or the other kind of martial arts. And I was
Mhm.
wondering that through them the universe shines, through
Yes.
them God dances, through them uh, soul starts to experience flow. And every time when that happens, they are so much in alignment with the universe that it shows up so beautiful. As you use the word beauty, I'm just wondering, how can we bring in this concept in the way business is done in today's world? And what are the possible challenges that you face? Because you talk about compassionate capitalism day in and day out.
Yeah. I, uh, I mentioned beauty for a reason. I think leadership can be beautiful.
Hmm,
Leadership oftentimes is not beautiful because it tends to default towards command and control, towards
hmm,
domination, that sort of thing. True leadership executed effectively, co-creating coordinated movement. It's like an extraordinarily beautiful dance
hmm,
that partners have said yes to. And even when they step on each other's toes, that's part of the dance, but and there's no that comes with it. It's just kind of like, well, that's how do we work this into the
hmm,
so there's almost an improvisational nature to it
hmm,
that makes room for creativity
hmm,
to emerge. And I mean, I used Ravi Shankar's sitar. I mean, he started with fundamentals. I mean,
hmm,
every musician does. Every musician starts with chords. They
hmm,
learn the chording, and then they start. Once they really work it, it becomes beautiful because they start putting themselves. I say
hmm,
themselves, not their egoic self, but they let spirit move too and use their hands or
hmm.
use their voice.
They
in a way
become
that
a,
expresses that beauty.
yeah,
They become the tool.
they become a conduit.
They become a conduit. And leadership is the same way. Leadership, when it is beautiful, you don't necessarily assign the notoriety to the leader. It's kind of like this just happens, and the ego is out of the way, and it's kind of, how did that occur? It's beautiful how this unfolded. That's what we're looking for. And you mentioned the word flow. This is kind of how the experience of flow unfolds. Is when we get our egos out of the way and we let spirit move the organization, move the people, move the process, and very few. The word I use oftentimes is elegance, and beauty and elegance to me are very synonymous. They kind of go together. And I took the word elegance from my experience in software coding. Elegant code is code that has no bugs. It does what it's supposed to do with no unintended consequences. I don't have to go back and clean up after myself. Leadership can be elegant. When leadership is elegant, it's beautiful. And far too often leaders have to go back and clean up after themselves because they were not particularly elegant. They didn't let the beauty actually move. They didn't let spirit, co-creation.
That's where their ego came in between and led that conversation, led that action, led that behavior, which was not good for the larger good.
Right. I need to be in control.
Yeah. And I can see that how, when I'm saying that I need to be in control, how is that coming from a space of fear? How is that coming from a space of scarcity mentality? Because in case I don't control that, the universe is not going to give me again.
Yep.
Blaine, I'm just wondering, there's so many people who are listening to us right now. How can we practically bring what we are talking about right now in our day-to-day conversations? How can I co-create and coordinate something which is good for the larger good? How can I, as you mentioned, co-create and coordinate movement from a space of soul? What are those few steps that we can do on a day-to-day basis?
You have been demonstrating it for the last, almost 45 minutes now. And it's through the use of questions. Questions allow for connection. They allow for connection. And if leaders could learn one thing, and I say leaders, this isn't role title specific. Everyone
is a leader.
Everyone's a leader. So if we can learn as human beings to ask questions that are designed to engage, tell me more about that. It's kind of like, help me understand, how do you see this in this way? An interesting way to think about this is there's approximately 6 billion people on this planet, a little bit more than somewhere in that neighborhood, 6 billion. We all live on the same planet. None of us live in the same world. Every single person lives in a different world. It's a world of my own making. So I am continuously in the process of dealing with aliens. You're from a different world. So, and this is kind of a fun way to think about this. I'm dealing with an alien. I want to understand how that alien's world is put together because I'd like to co-create with it. I'd like to coordinate with it. And for me to expect you to change your world to match my world is stupid. It's not going to work. But if I can understand your world and you can understand my world, we can find commonalities. We can find where things overlap. We can find opportunities to co-create coordinated movement. And you don't have to change. I don't have to change. Whenever I'm asking somebody or saying to somebody, you need to change, by definition, what I'm saying is you're not doing it right. And as soon as people hear that, they start to get defensive. You need to change. Well, what's wrong? All of this stuff starts to come as a consequence of being directive, not curious, not inquisitive, not curious. Questions invite engagement.
So profound listening to you, Blaine. Thank you so much for the last few words that you mentioned. That every time when I'm asking you to change, what I'm saying is what you're doing is not right, is not correct. But at the same time, what I don't realize is that I'm talking to an alien. And here, how can I respect an alien? How can I respect the world that the other person is coming from? And rather than offering my curiosity and respect to the other person, I start to get into a space of control. I start to get into the space of judgments without realizing that judgments is something that creates separation.
Yep, exactly.
Thank you so much, Blaine. Blaine, if you were to go 40 years back when you would have started your journey in this space, what's that one piece of advice that you would like to offer to yourself?
I've thought about that a lot. I honestly, I think the one piece of advice that I would have given to that young man back then is to be curious more, just to be curious more. And I think that would have served me very well. I got curious later in life. I was always kind of curious, but I put curiosity on the shelf as I started doing my career because I needed to do it the right way, and I didn't want to question what the right way was. It's just kind of like, this is what they told me to do, so I'm going to go do that. Curiosity, yeah, opens up all kinds of possibilities.
Thank you so much, Blaine. Such an honor having you on this podcast. And as I've told you so many times, Blaine, always a pleasure, always an honor, always a privilege. Just being sitting in front of you and listening to you, because I get to hear a lot of wisdom in a very short span of time. And I suddenly realized that how blessed I am to have people like you in my life. So thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely my pleasure. Anytime. You take care.